than it does at the bottom. And so it's just one of those wild, fun things that when you get home and you really start looking closely at, you put a shoebox up or something like that and put a light source over it, and you start looking really closely at it, you'll see that these odd phenomena are happening inside of the shadows on boxes. And so the third, I guess the second basic shape that I've got on the sheet is the cylinder. And if you looked at the drawings that I passed around, I've got the drawing of the hand, and then I've got the drawing of the shoes. And you got shoelaces on the shoes. The shoelaces on the shoes are all basically cylinders. And then the hand, the forearm, is a very basic cylinder. The way you do shading on the cylinder ends up being more along the lines of foreshortening than anything else. And if y'all are familiar with foreshortening, you know that things that are further away end up appearing slightly darker than things that are closer up. And so these sides will end up having the effect of looking like they're in the shadows. And then the part that's the closest to you will end up being the shade like number 2 on your grayscale. And then it's just a matter of connecting those two with the rest of the grayscale there, where we end up putting in the 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 right down to the front. And I'm doing a very crude version of this on here. That's more for explanation purposes, so I hope nobody's holding me to high levels while looking at these quick sketches. And then drawing spheres. Anytime that you're drawing a baseball or a golf ball or anything else, the lighting situation on it seems to obey a totally third set of concepts. It's somewhere between the cube and the cylinder, where the parts that are furthest away do appear darker than the parts that are closest. But then you also have to identify where the light source is, because where the light source is hitting the ball is where it's absolutely going to be lightest, obviously. And so if it's in the top third, I end up just generally identifying it by doing a very light circle that's about the shade that I'm going to be filling in. That's a little darker, but hopefully it shows up in the mirror for everybody. But then I end up making an oval around that that's slightly darker, and an oval around that that's slightly darker. And then I start discovering that I'm running out of space. I can't make complete circles around it. That's just fine. You fill in what you can, and you don't worry about getting every single one of them out there. The big thing ends up being that whatever is in the outside shaded area, the outside oval area, will end up being the absolute darkest of all the parts on the sphere or on the ball. Generally, that'll be the underside where the light can't get to. Unless maybe you're laying it on a white surface, then it's going to be very complicated to find shadows on it anywhere. The next area will end up being just this next step darker on the step lighter rather on the grayscale. And then we end up with the next one in being just a little bit lighter, and everybody knows where this is going. So it doesn't end up being a very complicated process. But then you end up with fairly close to a spherical effect. You may end up having to go back and darken things in. When I was back in high school and dealing with my favorite art teacher ever, the number one rule she always told us when drawing is always make your darks darker and your lights lighter. When I first did this self-portrait drawing over here, everything was kind of a gray bland because I didn't go in there and try to make the darks darker and the lights lighter. Now I've gone back over it, and the pieces seem to have some real three-dimensional depth to them. It does seem to curve out, like on the shirt and then the curves of the form down there. And that's because we've got the complete shading in there, where we've really identified the piece, made the darks darker, kept the lights light. And it does seem to protrude off of it a little bit, gives it kind of that 3D effect. And I think I've basically run through everything that I had to say on the basic drawing stuff. The rest of it, the first step in understanding drawing, the first step in doing a good drawing, is understanding what you're seeing. But if you can see clearly, if you know what you're looking at, and you're able to draw any sort of a mark at all, then it's just a matter of logically understanding, piecing together what it is that you see and what you understand. And once you bring those together, you get on the scale of realism somewhere. Some of us are going to be closer to the number 1 with stick figures, and some of us are going to be closer to photorealism on the number 10 end of the scale. But the more time that you spend working on it and just looking at things and sketching and drawing, I almost always have my sketchbook with me. As I was pulling in this evening, I realized I left it at home, so I can't show you the work that I've been doing in there. You've seen the pieces that I've passed around. The pieces that I was passing around here were just pieces that I did in the sketchbook while waiting for students at Hobby Lobby. This wasn't a matter of spending a great deal of time at home in the studio staring at something closely. I know that some of you have seen the piece that I've got on display in the Thea June Art Show. That one, I sat down in the studio and it probably took me 8 to 10 hours of just examining really closely to identify all the little pieces. And when I was done with it, it does have a really, I'm still probably about an 8 on the scale. It's not photorealism, but I'm very proud of it, and it jumps off the page very nicely. I've got some plans. I was hoping to go around and take that drawing to different shoe boutiques and see if I could get somebody to pay me to illustrate their shoes for them. But then I made the mistake of entering it in the show, and now I can't pull it out to take it around. But yeah, next year, that's when I'm going to do it. That piece will be out, and I'll be able to go and do that, and no longer needed to be promoting the website. So now I'm back to promoting the website. I want everybody to grab one of these yellow sheets and take it home with them, and remember to put this on their fridge and submit some information.
What happens when you put your photograph on there, your number 1 thing, and you don't put your artwork? How do you go back and put your artwork in?
Well, the way that I currently have the website set up for submitting information, like you're saying, it's got a web form. And the way the web form works is you put in your name and your information, your artist statement, and then it allows you to upload up to 10 photos of your work. I don't know how many of you are familiar with attaching things to email, but it works very similar, where you push the button at the end and it has you go through your computer and identify where it's at. And once you've got them all in there, then I've got this thing at the bottom called a CAPTCHA, which many of you probably will not be familiar with. The thing called CAPTCHA ends up being a random assortment of text letters that's very hard for a computer to read, so that computers don't go through and randomly fill out these forms for people and submit information that just ends up being junk that people try to put in to just fill up websites with erroneous information. But once you fill out all this other information, you fill out the CAPTCHA with the information you see there, and once you hit the button that says that you've got the CAPTCHA filled out, it submits the form. If you don't have all of your pictures in, and you just filled in the text, and then you go fill in the CAPTCHA and hit the send button, you're sending me an email that has just your information at the top. If you want to attach the photos to it later, you'll end up having to fill out the form again. You don't have to fill it out completely. I've already got the first email. So then you just put your name up in the top and then do the other attachments and email it directly there. There is a small additional problem with the website, with the web form rather. With the web form, I'm assuming that anybody that's using the web form is able to make sure their photo is not the high quality photos that we would want for like printing digital prints. We need a very high quality photo. For publishing on a website, we don't need a very high quality photo at all. And so you end up having to take your high-quality photo